Delhi is in a very fortunate situation over the historical developments which have taken place in Delhi and the type of emphasis on quality which Delhi government, the Directorate of Education and the CRT has given. So as we would go through the presentation, we realize Delhi has least of the problems in terms of when compared to many other states. So I'll give a sort of a national perspective, but at the same time there is no room for complacency and a lot of work needs to be done. So I'll give you a national perspective of what are the major provisions in the Act relating to teachers and teacher education, where we stand in the present context, and where we have to go in future, what is the role of the CRT, the diets in future. This is just a gist of what the Act is all about. There are 10 main functions of the Act. Principally, it is for making education free. Free, if you have gone through the Act, free would mean that every child in the age group of 6 to 14 has the right to receive free education in a neighborhood school. It is not free in any school. It is free only in a neighborhood school. That is where the right of the child is. The second aspect, compulsory education. The compulsion is on the government. It is on the state government and the local authority to provide free education to all children in the age of 6 to 14 and ensure that they have the complete elementary education of the quality which has been talked of. Third is the curriculum to be consistent with constitutional values, and Section 29(2) gives the various principles on the basis of which the curriculum of schools, of elementary classes, have to be prepared, and that is where the role of SCRT is extremely relevant. Teacher quality is another important facet, and that is why we all have met today. The crucial role of teachers in making the RTE a reality. The quality of teachers, what would be the minimum qualifications for teachers, that has to be nationally determined. It's already been determined by the NCT. I'll come to that later. And there's a great emphasis on quality of teachers because ultimately it is the teachers who would reshape what happens in the classrooms. A minimum quality or norms and standards for each school has been prescribed in the schedule to the RTE Act in terms of what should be the minimum number of teachers in a school, what should be the infrastructure facilities in the school, what should be the duration of working days, weekly, and total number of and other equipments like sports equipments, library and other facilities which have to be provided in school. And this has to be provided in all schools, government, aided, unaided schools as well. A social reform function, we are now looking at more from we no longer look at education as a benefits approach. It is a rights and entitlements approach. So that involves a lot of participation, not only of the education department, of school heads, but also of the community. So it is really an act which would reform or which would tend to reform the school education system over time to come. When you have an act which is there to protect the rights, there has to be a monitoring agency to ensure that the rights are getting protected. So the National Commission for Protection of Child Rights and the State Commission for Protection of Child Rights have been given statutory functions under this Act to protect the rights of the child under this Act. You have the Delhi Commission in Delhi, and in several states where we do not have a commission, the Act provides for formation of an interim authority, and in the rules we've talked about the Right to Education Protection Authority. And this authority is to perform the functions of the State Commission till such time the State Commission is constituted. Debureaucratization function, that is definitely intended that barring the issue of recognition of schools which is a one-time matter, there would be what you call a hands-free distance between the school and the bureaucracy, and to ensure that school function in an autonomous and independent fashion. Civil society has a major role to play, as I mentioned. One of the important factors, one of the important agents which has been conceived under this Act is that of the School Management Committee, Now, the School Management Committee constituted under this Act, under Section 21, 75% of the members of this committee would be from among parents of the children, because when the law was being framed, it was realized that the most important stakeholder of the school system, other than the child himself or herself, are the parents of the children. And they need to play an important role in ensuring that the school functions in the manner in which they felt, and that is the reason why they send the children to school. So this is a very, very important provision of constitution of a school management committee in all government schools and government aided schools. Now, the concept of CCE, which has already been in vogue in Delhi in the primary classes, and now it is there for the entire elementary classes, and also the fact that there would not be any board exams till completion of elementary education. Many states still have a concept of a board exam in classes 8th or class 7th. Now, that would no longer be there, and that is to remove this oppression of exams at the tender age in which children are at the elementary level. So these broadly are the 10 functions of the RTE Act. Of course, there are many other areas which require greater detail and discussion, but chiefly these are there. Now let me just get into the provisions of RTE Act relating to teachers and teacher education. Section 7 contains very important provisions relating to the role of the central government. The central government is to prepare a framework of national curriculum, and I would also like to welcome Professor Nagpal, who's head of the teacher education department in NCRT, and the NCRT has been designated as the national academic authority for the development of a national curriculum framework. Till such time a new framework is developed, it is the NCF 2005 which shall be the national curriculum framework under this section. The other important provision is to develop and enforce standards for training, and here the role of the central government in the context of the centrally sponsored scheme of teacher education, its revision, and its role along with the NCT in developing and enforcing standards of teacher training becomes extremely relevant. Apart from that, as I mentioned earlier, the schedule to the Act talks about the people-teacher ratio, and at the upper primary level you have to have part-time instructors for art, health and physical education and work education. Section 23 is one of the most important provisions, one of the most sweeping provisions in the sense that the minimum qualifications will be laid down by the central government, and those qualifications would apply to all schools, all categories of schools, government schools, private schools, aided schools, and no teacher shall be appointed unless he possesses those minimum qualifications. That is quite an important landmark provision, and that has great implications in terms of the supply of qualified persons from the teacher education institutions of this country, the role of the diets, the role of the private teacher education institutions. Of course, we need to have some interim solution in the sense that there are several states, and I will mention those states later, which do have a major crisis in terms of supply of trained manpower, and those states need to be given a window, a 5-year window. So those states would be given a 5-year window in which they can deploy teachers, persons who do not possess those minimum qualifications. But that relaxation will be given only by the central government, and in the absence of such relaxation, the states will not be able to deploy untrained persons. Delhi has a very important legislation in its regulation that even teachers of aided and unaided schools, the salaries have to be pegged at par with that of the government school teachers. And that is one reason why the salaries of teachers in Delhi and even the private schools is quite reasonable. And I think that is one thing which many states need to emulate, because to attract teachers into the profession, to attract people into this profession, salary definitely is an important component of that. Apart from various other factors which affects or which attracts people into this teaching profession, there is definitely a national level crisis of the fact that we are not able to get the best persons in the teaching profession. And the government, both the state government and the central government, need to make various efforts in order to ensure that we are able to attract the best professions. And definitely giving a high salary, a commensurate salary to the work which they do and the status which they have in the society is the first step to ensure that we get the best into the profession. Section 24 delineates the various academic responsibilities of teachers, and that is significant because it flows from the fact that once you have a curriculum and evaluation procedure, that it is the duty of the teacher to take that forward in the classroom, and also to ensure that teachers need to work with the children and with the parents, and where children are falling behind for one reason or the other, they have to be given even remedial classes, and which the teachers will have to work upon with the child. The pupil-teacher ratio to be maintained in each school. Now, that is very relevant because in many states, Delhi may not have that problem, but in several states what we have found that teachers are concentrated in the headquarters, in the bigger cities, and there is a great shortage of teachers in the semi-urban and rural area schools. So that teacher redeployment becomes a very crucial thing in ensuring that in every school you have the requisite number of teachers, and several states now have taken up a major exercise of redeployment of teachers across districts and within districts between the urban areas and the rural areas. Also, an issue of vacancy of teachers, I'll come to the statistics, huge vacancy of teachers across the country. Delhi, of course, has got a small problem in that. Still there are vacancies, but many states, the vacancies run into lakhs. And that is a major problem. And vacancy, therefore, it provided that vacancy should not exceed at any point of time 10% of the total sanctioned strength. Teachers not to be deployed for non-academic purposes other than disaster relief, decennial population census, and election duty. On election duty, there were we issued a guideline as well that what constitutes election duty. We had referred the matter to the Election Commission, and there was also a decision of the Supreme Court. And thereafter, we issued a small clarification on what exactly constitutes election duty for teachers within the meaning of Section 27 of the Act. The Act bans private tuitions and, in fact, expects teachers to be with the child even in school and after school hours, rather than getting into a commercial venture of encouraging private tuitions for the children. As I mentioned, Section 29 is a very, very important provision, and that is the cornerstone of quality in school in the RTE Act, that the state government shall appoint an academic authority which shall prepare the curriculum and evaluation procedure. In our model rules, we have indicated that the SCRT should be notified as the academic authority.